Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order of the Driving, Training, and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee meeting. So now in order, we are 10 minutes in, 10:05. We're going to start off with the roll call. Delia, if you don't mind, thank you so much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Ricardo Benavides.
Present.
David Bruce.
Present.
Blake Garrett.
Present.
Victoria Barroso.
Present.
Francis Gomez.
Present.
Kevin Knapp.
I am here.
Carlos Reina.
Present.
Nina Joe Saint.
Present.
Sam L. Webb. Absent. Glenn P. Winningham.
Here.
Thank you. Have a quorum.
Thank you, Delia, so much. We do have a quorum present. I'd like to make a motion to excuse Mr. Webb, Sam Webb, today.
So moved.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate that. Second, and
Second.
thank you so much. Quick little vote here. All those approving that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Excellent. Actually, before I continue, members, and of course, those of you that are here joining us and the audience on the internet, I'd like to welcome our newest member, committee member, Victoria Barroso. Is that correct, Victoria?
Yes, it is.
Hello. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, just briefly.
Okay, well, I'm from El Paso, Texas. I do own a driving school, West Texas Driving Academy, but I do represent traditional driver's education. And we've had our school for about 6 years, and it's really great. A really great opportunity to be out here with everybody.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Victoria, for your time and for being here.
Oh, thank
It's a
you.
pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you on board representing. Thank you. Okay, the next item we have is the approval of the minutes. I'm hoping that we all had an opportunity to look at that. We'd like to get those approved before we vote on that. Members, anybody have any questions about our last meeting, the minutes? Any corrections, anything that needs to be done on the approval of the minutes from the last time?
I don't think so, no.
We're good? I'll
think I'm
consider a motion. I'm sorry?
I think I'm good.
Okay, we're good. All right, with that in mind, then I guess I'll consider a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make that motion. This is Carlos
Thank you,
Reina.
Carlos. I appreciate that. We have a motion on the floor, members.
Seconded.
Second, thank you so much, sir. I appreciate that. Excellent. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Excellent, unanimous. We have approval of the minutes from the last time. All right. I know we have quite an agenda today. Our next agenda item is D. It's the public comment. I don't know if we had any. Usually we get a form or two. This is the portion where the public has the option to come up here and address the committee, talk about anything for 3 minutes. Anybody care to talk? Don't want to force anybody, but this is the opportunity. Absolutely. Thanks so much, public, those familiar faces here for being here. Then I'm going to move right along to our next item, recognition of service by the department to the family of Coach Ruben Jordan. Brian? Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate that. Presenting right now is, of course, the big cheese, Brian.
The big buffet. Mr. Chairman and committee members, I'm Brian Francis, Executive Director with TDLR. Brian, can you give me that microphone real quick? Not that much. I knew Terry was going to come in. I got scared. I knew he was coming in. Terry, thank you. I appreciate it. I should have grabbed it at first, but I just like seeing you in the meetings. Brian Francis, Executive Director with TDLR. This is something that we've started probably in the last 6 or 7 months with several of our programs, honoring people who have left us. And it's getting tough because we've done too many of them. We've done too many of those. We had a young lady who wanted to become an athletic trainer, and she was killed in a car accident. prior to attaining that level. The same thing here with Coach Jordan. We have a gentleman who reminds me of myself in terms of athletic, prowess and doing those things on the field. But he far exceeds, I think, all of us in terms of his compassion and his heart for serving others. I mean, here's a gentleman who well, all of us, I think most of the folks in the room that have a little bit gray in their head, a lot of us did the driver education with the coach. We had Coach so-and-so that was teaching us driving, and I don't think it applies to Coach Jordan, but maybe that's why some of us drive the way we do. I don't know. But I loved having that coach in that car. It was somebody who knew me on the field, but they were also teaching me about life. They were teaching me in that seat next to me. Coach Jordan's that type of man. When you read the stories in the articles about how many lives he's touched, how many kids called him coach who never performed on an athletic field underneath him, but they were still coached by him in life. He taught them about respect, courage, honor, trust, integrity. Those are the things that made him who he is. And Coach Jordan lost his life being himself. Again, selfless. When Harvey hit, it was devastating. We all know it's the largest natural disaster to hit. And Coach Jordan runs right into the face of the storm, and he's putting people on boats. He's out there in the water, placing them on boats. They said, Coach Jordan, this is your place. You need to get on here. He says, no, go on. I'll take care of myself. I got some more people. That's how he lived his life. It's a loss, but what a courageous sacrifice. What a courageous sacrifice for a man to recognize that giving himself to a cause greater than himself is, that's what it's about. I think it speaks volumes to this industry. When we took over the driver education program, I remember the hearings and people talking about, can TLR do this? This is an important issue. We don't want to trust the lives of children with an agency that does X, Y, and Z. And it hit me. They were coming from a passionate place, but I thought about it because I drove to the hearing and I drove from the hearing, and all the drivers on the road are touched by the folks that teach driver education. That's huge. It's a huge responsibility. And I know that you guys take it seriously, and to have someone in your ranks like Coach Jordan who took it to the nth degree, that I'm going to give and sacrifice my life, not just to create safe drivers so that we can have that moment of getting back to our families. I think we take it for granted. We think that getting home today from work is a given. It's not. It's not a given. And I think the work that you do as educators, the work that you do as educators and our staff, that they do ensuring that the curriculum is just right, that it's perfect, I think that's important, but I think we need to up it a little bit. Brian Bill, I think we need to honor Coach Jordan every time we review those courses. We need to honor him when we're doing the inspections, when we're having these meetings. The decisions you're making today are not perfunctory. They're not just a casual wave of the hand and, oh, I'll take a motion for this. Let's think about honoring him in the things that we do. We have breath, so we can honor him in the things that we do today. And so to his family, I just want to tell him thank you. Thank you for sharing this wonderful man with us. This plaque will not replace him, but it will remind them that people cared, respected, and honored Coach Jordan for who he is and the things that he's done. And so I'd just like to take a moment of silence in honor of him, and we will make sure that this plaque gets to his family. So if you'll join me in a moment of silence for Coach Reuben Jordan. I think in a football game we'd say at this point now, ready, break! All right, let's get back to work now.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. That was a beautiful presentation. Okay. Okay, we are moving to our next agenda item. It's item F for the staff reports. Briefing from the staff and discussion. We'll have, first one is the licensing division. Chloe.
Dramatic effect.
Boom.
Oh, sorry, Chloe.
Mary Winston, TDLR. Chloe, did you get it together before you, I saw you wiping tears back there.
Yes.
Okay.
I think I'm the crybaby of the family, so. And today's my dad's birthday, so. Okay. Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Benavides and board members, and welcome to our new board member, Ms. Barroso. Before you is my report, statistics reports, and if you have any questions on those numbers, we can discuss them. I wanted to briefly let you know that this is our busy time of the year for certificate orders, getting ready for the summer. So they have been coming in, and we have been getting them out. So if you have those in the industry, that let them know their certificate orders are going out. I also want to do just a little reminder that we've been getting some old forms back before the program was even transferred to us. So they're forms that are from 2013. So we have new forms that are out there on the website. So if you please use those forms. Renewal forms go out to the instructors automatically, so that renewal form is no longer out there. So if they haven't received it 65 days prior to the license expiring, then please let us know so we can get the form to you, and we can email it to get the email out to them with the renewal form on it. If you have any other questions.
Fantastic, members. Thank you so much.
You're
Chloe.
welcome.
Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, our next item, number 2F2, Customer Service Division. Good morning, Ms. Gibb.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioner, board members. Misty Maldonado de Leon, Customer Service Manager. I believe our director so graciously introduced our division last meeting.
That's right.
So today I'm just here to give you statistics. So as you can see on the report, we do have an increase of contacts going into the busy season, so we are anticipating that. Other than that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Members? Great work, Misty.
Thank
For the customer
you.
service, thank you so much. Thank you very much. We're moving right along. F3 agenda is Enforcement Division. Morning, Ron.
Good morning to y'all.
Morning.
Morning.
Well, we don't have much to say today either, at least for this first part. I'm Ron Foster with the Enforcement Division, Senior Prosecutor there, presenting this enforcement report. As you can see, we don't have any cases that resulted in a penalty or sanction for this time period, but you'll see the main note for the report, which we'll have another segment later on, I think under agenda item L, where we discussed enforcement plan. I will note that we have about 60 cases open right now. We have resolved 40 cases in the previous quarter. And I did make a note. I was looking through what kind of files, cases we have. And it looks like the majority of cases that we have open right now are consumer complaints. I had about 37 that I counted were a consumer complaint, but they're all in various stages of investigation or prosecution at this time. But that concludes my report. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
This is Carlos Reyna. Ron?
Yes.
I have a question. I was on the work group committee working on the penalty matrix,
Yes.
which I believe we're going to discuss today. So I'm seeing the penalties have been assessed. What basis is being used to come up with the figures to assess
We
fines?
had some general guidelines, and Mr. Randall, that we were using. We kind of knew what the caps were already that we discussed in our enforcement plan work groups, right? And so we just tried to use best judgment when we were looking at the types of penalty, the type of violations, and seeing, okay, would that sound like a very serious? I was using just best judgment at that time because we didn't have the framework in place. But I could look to other programs and look for similar types of violations and kind of figure out, is that, A, B, C, D, what level of violation is that? That's what I would have done.
Not knowing what the past penalties were, how are they in line with what we came up with?
I think they're pretty similar, and we didn't we didn't have that many penalties in the past, but I think they were pretty similar to where we are right now. Of course, they're not exactly where we are because we did a lot of great work together on the work group, and I think it moved things around a little bit, but I think it's fairly close to where we were at.
Thank you, Ron.
Any other questions?
Members, any other questions for Ron?
All right, thank you.
So much as always, Ron.
All right, thank
Great
you.
seeing you again. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is F4, Education and Examination Division.
Good morning,
Good
Chairman,
morning.
members of the board, and our newest member. It makes me happy that someone here is newer than I am. Angie Schmidt, team lead for E&E. I'm going to give you a few updates on our Community Safety Act, Senate Bill 30. On April 19th, Ray Pizarro and myself did get to go to the first filming of the video. It was at ACC. There was Travis County Constable, Williamson County, DPS, TCOL, and some actors from ACC and Houston Police Department as well. We have provided some pictures in your packet. It was a lot of fun. We did not stay for the nighttime portion, and I guess things got exciting because Austin PD pulled up there. They thought it was a real stop. They were coming to help, so they had to run out there and explain, we're just filming, we're just filming. The videographer who is filming this is doing this of his own free time.
Oh,
His equipment, he's providing everything to do this. So we're really excited. On the front page of our website is now a link with information about the Community Safety Education Act. And there's also a statement from, as the chairman so put it, the big cheese, Brian Francis. Some proposed deadlines. We did get to see a rough draft at the April 26th meeting we had in Florence with the group. It was a very rough draft. It was about probably 2.5 minutes. Some proposed deadlines are another rough draft to be completed May 15th. The basic peace officer course and in-service objectives will also be completed May 15th. And there will be a video roundtable filmed in Houston by TAPS, which is the Teen and Police Service Academy out of Houston with Dr. Everett Penn. They're going to film a roundtable portion, question and answer. The video completion should be done June 1st, and the TEA draft, which is the discussion points, the questions, curriculum to be discussed during the pause points, should be June 8th. Our next meeting is June 6th at 10 a.m. in Florence. Previously, before I arrived, the curriculum work group identified a lot of sections that need to be updated, obviously. Once we have the timing of the video, the discussion points, have all that nailed down, we would like to meet to update the curriculum because that is going to have to go in there and do it all at once instead of having several sessions. So we want to make all those changes at one time. Is there any questions regarding the Community Safety Act video?
members?
Yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely not.
Actually, a comment. I know this is not a saint. It's not behaving. Do you feel, looking at the first segment and so forth, that the video time is now being reduced to maybe about 15 minutes?
That was what was discussed, that we had originally thought maybe 20 minutes, and we feel now it will probably go down to about 15. So it will be better incorporated, easier incorporated into the curriculum. Okay, moving on to Senate Bill 1051. This was the...
I have a question.
Oh,
This is
yes, I'm
Carlos
sorry.
Mayor. On that 15-minute segment, is it going to be just one fluid presentation, or is there any possibility of it being able to be spliced or broken up to where it can be presented during the entire course rather than all in one bulk form?
There will be pause points in the video for discussion and extra teaching for the instructor. There will be those pause points.
Thank you.
But other than that, it will run as a video. Okay, on 1051, which was the creation of an ASL driver education course, this request for proposal It has been submitted to CATRAD, which is the Contract Advisory Team Review and Delegation Team. I always have to look at that because that's a lot of letters. For their review and approval. They say it could take 30 days. That's not a hard deadline. It could take 45, but as soon as that is out, we will be able to accept bids.
And Angela, if I may, Carla James, TDLR, CATRAD is not part of our agency. It's part of the Comptroller's Office, who is the oversight entity for purchasing in the state. So just so you understand, we're going through the required process, but we're done with our side at this point. Thank you.
Are there any questions about Senate Bill 1051?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Ray Pizarro, Director for the Education Examination Division. We continue to, as an agency, to make changes, shifting resources so that we can be more productive for the licensees we regulate to help you guys and continue to be transparent. Most recently, some of the changes made for E&E was to move Michael Strong Ford, I call him Ford by his middle name, and John Schildwachter.
Schildwachter.
Don't ask me to say that again.
Don't call him Ford, just call him Schildwachter.
So those two individuals moved to E&E with what they will be doing is kind of the oversight of the programs we administer on a daily basis. So we're looking at currently the transportation network, and Ford has the oversight of the driver education program for you guys. As our team administer those programs, he kind of oversees the oversight of it. This is something new we're looking at, and that allows Angie's team to utilize the resources and helping you guys on getting schools approved, getting providers approved, those kinds of things. So with that said, we're going to bring Ford up here so he can provide you with his half of the presentation.
Fantastic.
Any questions?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, members,
Good morning.
especially to our newest member. Congratulations again. Michael Strawn, Education and Examination. Appreciate Ray introducing me. Was formerly in compliance, and as he said, I moved down to Education and Examination. I don't look at it as a loss. I gained 18 other new family members, and very happy to be where I am, just naturally doing already what I was doing prior, just more closely with the team that's handling driver education and safety. One of the first things we did when he came down was we had to look at outreach. Public outreach was already a process that we had in compliance, and how to kind of mold those into just a more broad scope, making sure that when we go out to ESC 6 conferences and workshops that we've been doing, what message we were going to deliver, and make sure that it was one message from, whereas we had a compliance message, we had the education examination message last time, it's all one voice now. So we've been going out to all these workshops, so we're from Lubbock, El Paso, Corpus Christi, Fort Worth, and we have many more coming up. And our message to the community this time around has been informing them of teamwork, collaboration, and involving them into the driver education and safety community, advising them of advisory boards, making sure they're available to them, that they're aware of how to attend these conferences, to view them online, educating them on strategic planning and summits that we hold. All these things are very new to this community, and they're very integral into the success of this program. One of the things that I know that Ray preaches, and we all do here at the agency, is we want the best for the community, and we have a vision for this, and we want it to be successful. Brian sat up there and talked about how important it was. When he drives on the road, everybody is impacted by this program, and so we want everybody to be as good as they can be. So when we go out, we strive to deliver that message to make sure that they're aware of what we're doing, we're transparent in what we're doing, and we have that feedback and that collaboration from our members in the community, whether it's you all in our work groups or our licensee base out there every single day. It's been met with a very positive reinforcement. There's a lot of people when we go out and ask, how many of y'all know that we have advisory boards? We get, 5-10%. So we've reached, 60 to 70 additional people every time we go out to let them know about all the things that we offer and the changes that are coming. The other part that we deliver during these workshops is all the legislative updates, so that we can make sure that all of our schools are in compliance with any new laws and rules that are coming out, and make sure that they're fully educated on that. That also transpires into our Education Connection newsletter. So we are actually in the process of updating that as well. It's going to be a fresh new look on it. It's going to be delivered almost like a magazine article now, to keep in line with our motto right now for plain talking and simplifying things for the individuals that are reading that, making sure that the information is delivered concise, consistently, and in a timely manner. And also that the information that's there is timeless as well, that when you read it, it's not expired. It's still relevant and can be relevant for much time to come. So we're excited for that, and we expect our newest one to be coming out in July. So we're looking forward to that. Speaking of legislative initiatives, we are, and I'm not going to steal, you're going to hear a lot about this later from our general counsel, but we do have our electronic certificate example in front of you all. As we said earlier, we speak about collaboration and teamwork. This is a starting point, a jump-off point for discussion and feedback. We met with the work group, and thanks to you all that showed up and provided y'all's input. This document and the certificate specifications that you all have in front of you are a direct result of the collaboration and the information that came out of these work groups. But that's not the end point. There's still a lot more work to be done there and feedback to be had, outreach to our licensees, to our end users, to courts, municipalities. But I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to everybody that was involved in that, to provide us with the feedback so that we were able to create something and start moving forward with this process. So again, thank you all very much. In talking with the work group, the last thing I have on my agenda was that in addition to just designing an electronic certificate, we needed a process. What we hear is that fraud is a big concern. And the only way that we can mitigate that fraud is with a validation tool. And so the department is seeking and moving forward with a process to validate that information. We're moving in-house. We already receive the information from our course providers. We already have tools that are existing in place, and we're moving forward with that process right now as well. So hopefully we'll have something very exciting here in the near future when we have a finalized certificate. We'll have a validation process as well that will meet all the requirements of our licensees, the work group, and all the courts and users that are out there as well. So, any other questions?
Members?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Congratulations, by the way, on the new position. Our next item is F5, field inspections. Good morning.
Good morning. I am Tanya Guthrow, and I'm the director of the Field Inspections Division. And this is my first time before this advisory board. And recently, TDLR, as you heard, has gone through some recalibration to sort of more efficiently address some of the new tasks and things that we have to do. And part of that was moving the driver education school function from the exams and education division to the field inspections division. So effective March 1st, we moved that task from E&E to field inspections, along with the 5 inspectors who were performing that duty. And I just wanted to today introduce myself and tell you that I'm excited to be part of TDLR's efforts to provide good service to this program and industry. Our division consists of, well, we'll eventually, once we hire up, 46 individuals, and 34 of those folks are inspectors, and they're located throughout the state. We have 3 regions. We have a north region, south region, and east region. So as you can imagine, inspectors have a large area to cover. In addition to that, we have a support training and analytics team that supports all of the different inspectors, make sure that they have the equipment they need, the information they need, while they're out there performing a variety of inspections. We inspect a variety of different programs for the agency, but not all of the programs. So you'll just see a list here in my report, but most significantly, you'll see that driver education schools is part of the duties that we're going to now do. And as part of our division personnel update, you'll see that the 5 school inspectors, Lance Corland, Amy Henshaw, Delinda Jew, Roy Cantu, and Ramon Rodriguez, have all been transferred. And they already know this program, they're already doing this task, and they're continuing on. Eventually, as we get folks cross-trained, we may expand the number of folks who perform this inspection. But for now, we're just learning the program, making sure that there's a smooth transition and that there's no break in service. I'd also like to acknowledge a new inspector we hired, Sharon Hollins, and she's located in the DFW area in our North region. And to congratulate Jennifer Harless, our South Region manager, who very recently was hired to be the agency's first strategic response coordinator. So we're in the process of hiring a new South Region manager. And that's a little bit about our division and what we're doing. We're following up with a list of the inspections that have been performed. And so you'll see some historical data. And then, of course, you know, since the month of March, since we've had this change, you'll see that we did 8 inspections that month. Do you guys have any questions? Not at this time?
Thank you. Anyone? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
Excuse
I
me.
appreciate it.
I have
Thank you.
a question. This is Carlos Reina.
Yes, sir.
If someone, a school is inspected out there and they're asked for something that they don't feel falls really under the rules the way they'd ask, who would they contact if they wanted to question or to clarify something?
Yeah, you know, every inspector hands out, and they've always been doing this, but they will continue to do this, a business card, but also you can ask to speak to the manager. The other thing to note is that we are staying in very close contact with our exams and education division to make sure that we're all on the same page. So if you have already, you know, some folks' numbers that you contact, you're welcome to contact them. They'll get us, you know, get the question to the right folks. You can always follow up, like I said, with a manager or anybody, and anybody at TDLR, and they should route you to the right people to answer that question for you.
Right. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Anybody else?
Thank you
All right.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We are going to be moving into the agenda item G, discussion and update and possible action on progress of work group regarding rule amendments. Yes. I'm sorry? Did I skip one? Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate that. Kevin always helps me out.
We
I completely
understand. You've already
skipped
heard
the
enough
most
from
important
Brian's.
Not
You were just waiting, Brian?
Not everybody likes cheese, Mr. Chairman. I can understand. We've
That's
had our-
hilarious. You were
had
just
our-
seeing how far I was going to go. I love it.
I was not going to. say
I'm
a
so
thing.
sorry about that. I skipped agenda item F6, the executive office.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis, Executive Director with TDLR. First of all, I want to welcome our newest committee member. This is a very active board. They're very engaged. And I'm excited because we're building something new. There's a lot of work. There are some of our programs to where the advisory boards are mature now and the programs are mature, so there's only incremental changes. But you're coming on the front end where we are building something new. And one of our folks in our Office of Innovation, Randy Nesbitt, talks about teams and how they're formed. And he says that teams go through the stages of being formed, forming, storming, norming, and performing. And I think we have moved from forming. We still have some storming going on, which is good, because you just don't become a team because the label's on you. You have to figure out the dynamics, who's there, what are the strengths, the weaknesses, and that sort of thing. So I think we're in that storming, and we're getting close to norming, and we're going to be hitting the ground full speed and performing on this. So I'm excited about it. And the team is not just the folks up there. It is our staff out here, and it's the industry folks that you represent. You've got a big responsibility. You've already hit the ground running, attending the El Paso strategic planning session. Thank you for being present. That means a lot. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'll start with the strategic plan update. We went to El Paso, McAllen, Houston, the Dallas area, as well as held one in Austin. I love the face-to-face conversations. You get a good turnout, but you have great dialogue. There are so often in our society, somebody will say a word and expect everyone to have the same understanding what that word means. And we don't. We have different experiences, education backgrounds, and motives and biases and all that stuff. Well, in those conversations, we're able to say, okay, you guys, TDLR needs to do more with enforcement. And we're able to ask the question, so what does more enforcement look like to you? What does it look like? Well, it means going after the unlicensed activity, all right? And then another person says, well, it's not going after the unlicensed activity, it's making sure that people can comply, and now we're having a full discussion about what that word more looks like. And so that's the exciting part about the face-to-face sessions. I will say without hesitation, the driver education industry was very well represented, vocally, with presence and ideas. They gave us a lot to think about. Those ideas that come out of the sessions, some may manifest in a statutory change, some may be a process change, some may just be a mental shift on our part as an agency. Wow, we didn't know we were doing that. We heard some similar themes, whether it's the search engines and how it's set up. We've heard some ideas of maybe changing the way education is directed towards driver education and moving away from a classroom setting to more of a, getting behind the wheel with more time. We don't know what the best way is, but just having those conversations, it's not something that we're afraid of. I think it's exciting to explore. Is there a way to bring down that fatality number? Is there a way to bring down the number of distracted drivers that are involved in fatalities or crashes on the road? Can we do something to change that number? And just tweaking something. And I'm going to challenge the board as we start having conversations about the curriculum. Let's not be beholden to this number of hours. Let's really focus on the content within those hours and how it's delivered. And let's talk about results. And I think we can make some changes in the area. So I'm excited about it. Some statutory changes that you'll probably see going forward in our strategic plan, which will be before our commission, I think, at their May 24th meeting. Is that correct? The strat plan? Yeah. We're going to finalize it there. Okay. We're having a family discussion. All right, yeah. So May 24th meeting. So a couple of things we're thinking about. One is maybe moving license terms that have 1 year to 2 year. One is just, it's selfish on our part. Trey, raise your hand. That's Trey. He's the Director of Customer Service. If we can spread out some of those 800,000 folks and just maybe have 400,000 of them call us every year instead of 650,000 calling us each year, that may help us manage the phone calls. It may help us manage the workloads a little bit better. We're also looking at a provision that we considered at the very end of last legislative session, which is to maybe change the inspection cycle, particularly when you look at the cosmetology program, and I'll use that as an example. You have a very dramatic difference in the sanitation violations that are in a traditional salon where they're cutting hair and a manicuring salon where they could cut flesh. There's a difference, and so maybe this one has a more frequent inspection cycle and this one's extended a little bit more. Those are some of the things we're thinking, and those could reach to your program because obviously we could think about expanding the inspection cycle for your group. Couple of things I wanted to point out. Strategic plan. Okay, we also took a lot of information via the webpage, Facebook, and so we have that information as well. You guys have some very good, lengthy writers that participate in the process, and they gave us a lot to chew on. I want to thank TDLR's most persistent follower of all things strategic planning external sessions, and that's Nina. She was in Arlington. She was in Houston. She was everywhere. I think I saw her 3 times in a 2-week period. I think, it was 3. Yeah, it was rumors. Rumors were running amok in that time period. But no, I appreciate the engagement. Nina brings a sense of calm and wisdom to the process. She knows how to direct the information, also get your attention. and I appreciate her involvement in that. Strat plan, now that, I wanted to segue to kudos to Ray and his leadership. I'm really proud of the things he's doing, and now I'm going to put a little bit more pressure on him. Ray's got a lot on his shoulders, and he's got a lot of great folks that are helping him. He's got a great team, but you've really been shining in this, and I'm excited about what's going to happen on September 1 with these different activities that we're engaged in. But I do appreciate everything you do, and your team, man, they're shining stars, absolutely shining stars. We also want to touch on, if you haven't noticed, on our webpage, we have included the information from TxDOT's Share the Road campaign for motorcycles. That's on our webpage, and that's we think that's part of our responsibility to get the word out to drivers who are not just going through a driver education program, but also knowing that this is an important issue. That's my segue to, on April 19th, the Sunset Commission adopted a report that would propose to move the motorcycle education program from the Department of Public Safety to TDLR, along with the ATV education program, all-terrain vehicle program. So you can imagine that in that conversation, and we've got a copy of issue 6 in front of you from that report, you can imagine that part of that conversation was TDLR already has the driver education component, and hopefully you guys will nod. This is a shameless plug. And they're doing a pretty good job with it. And so maybe it makes sense to move that other piece underneath TDLR. It's a starting point. If you go through Sunset, this is a step in it. It is not a done deal. There'll have to be a bill introduced. They'll have to have the hearings and that sort of thing. But it's something that could start the dialogue. We're going to be available to Sunset to answer any questions they have. We're going to be working closely with Department of Public Safety. There is another issue that they have that TDLR will assist and work with them in reviewing some of their rules and some of their processes for the Regulatory Services Division, basically as a partner, and just giving them some of our best practices, and we're also going to steal their best practices, because that's what we do. We Borg everything. We grab the best that's out there and try to make it TDLRs. Shared road, got that, important. That. The thing I wanted to tell you.
Excuse me, Brian.
Yes,
you
sir.
mind, is that something that you guys welcome? Not that it really matters once the legislators decide to do it, but is that something that you guys welcome to bring in?
It's a great question, and my staff is evaluating how I respond to this, so this is a perfect training moment for them. I wouldn't use the word welcome, because I don't think that factors into the analysis.
Right.
But I feel that we're capable of doing it. And if the legislature's will is to move that, we're going to do it to the best of our ability. We're going to honor the process and how it's worked before, but if it comes to us, we're going to do it well. And I know that Ray's team will be able to handle those activities if the legislature decides to move that to our agency. We have had conversations with Sunset and other industries, and we've expressed to them when we feel like a program doesn't fit our business model. You know, I'm always being asked the question, you know, Brian, what's too big? And oh my gosh, you guys are enormous, and what's too big and what's too fast? That explosive growth that we had in 2015 with the 2 programs related to driver safety and driver education, the 13 programs from the Department of State Health Services, that was a huge explosion in responsibility. We've learned from that. The staff has done a great job. They've been stressed by it, just hearing the number, but they've performed incredibly well in that. I don't think it's an issue of the number per se. I think it's the type of program. And with that said, I think the motorcycle education program and the ATV education program, I think it fits. I think there's a nexus there of having all things education related to what's on the road and the people who are driving. I think there's some synergy that can be gained from that. So,
I certainly do. I was just wondering how you.
I'm not allowed to have feelings during work hours, but on the weekends,
I'll ask you Saturday.
I'm really human on the weekends, very human in those moments as well.
This
Carlos,
is-
any thoughts, anything you want to?
This is Carlos Reyna.
Yes, sir.
Another question. Having ridden and still riding motorcycles most of my life, I took the course, even though I didn't have to, because my 2 sons began riding.
Okay.
And the course was good. It was worth doing. noticing you're gonna have 3 less FTEs, do you have the staff? Do they have the knowledge, the background that will be able to really support that? Do you plan to, are there plans to license the providers that do it?
When you dive deep into that issue, you're going to see that there were a number of current activities that are performed by the Motorcycle Education Division that will not be performed going forward. And so there is a trade-off in duties and responsibilities. We think it's commensurate with the number of FTEs that have been included in there. I think historically they had 9 FTEs and they're proposing 7 or 6 or something like that. But we feel like that change allows for us to be successful. We talked very, very directly about what we needed based on what would come over, how it would fit into our organization. And so we feel like those changes allow for a perfect balance that could be.
Yeah, well, don't get me wrong, I think it would fit. I think it would fit real well.
I'm terrified of motorcycles. I don't know if that helps or not, but I'm very aware of them as well. And that Look Twice, Share the Road campaign, man, when you hear it initially, it rings in your ear, and you do it. So I think we can't do enough to help in that regard. Carla's reminded me that we have 2 new commissioners at the commission level. We have Dr. Weston, who joined at the last meeting, and then we'll have Dr. Callis. His first meeting will be on May 24th. Notice the word DR was in front of both of those. I think that's a statement about the increase in the shift to medical and health-related programs that TLR has. So wish me luck with my new bosses. It's going to be fantastic working with them.
Brian, this is Nina Saint. Have you, any of the clubs, the motorcycle clubs, reached out and contacted you at this time?
They have not, but I've noticed a little bit more motorcycle traffic on my street in my neighborhood, and so I don't know if they've been Googling the residential stuff. I'm joking, they have not. They haven't reached out to us yet, but I anticipate that they will.
Oh, I work with the Texas Motorcycle Safety Coalition, and yes, they probably will.
Tell them to come and talk to us. I mean,
Well,
I'd love
they
to-
have a meeting May 24th. They've already reached out to me, asking me my thoughts on this, since driver education is already here. So if you have anything you'd like me to share, if you please
Absolutely.
send that to me. Because again, change for anybody is something different, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. Everybody doesn't, that word just.
Sure. And again, remember, this is
And
to
touching
change.
that
Yeah.
dedicated fund they have, I noticed that was in this document, which they forgot to tell me that. They're highly protective of that dedicated fund, so that could be an issue. And they probably will show up in leathers on their motorcycles to all the hearings.
I love it.
in
I love
force.
it.
It's gonna be
It's going to be
quite a
interesting.
show.
It's
yes.
going to be interesting. And we'll do it just the way we did with the driver education program. I'm going to be right down the middle. Can you do it, Mr. Francis? Yes, we can. Given the resources, given the opportunity and the time, we can do it well, but we're not out there seeking it. And we'll do the very best we can. May 24th is our next commission meeting, so we may try to figure out having at least somebody there to listen. I think at this point in the game, it's more important that we listen as opposed to drive the conversation. No pun intended. But just, that we listen and be available to learn. And Mr. Chairman, unless, Carla, do you have anything? Mr. Chairman and committee members, that's all I have unless there are any other questions.
Members? Anybody? Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you.
I appreciate that. Before I, yes, ma'am.
One other question on the 2-year license renewal change that you suggested. Would that be for schools, instructors, everybody, or just instructors?
Here's the initial walk down Brian's little murky brain. I think the schools need to have the annual. I think I'm going to probably recommend to our staff that schools and things like facilities, equipment that has a more frequent inspection cycle, or license cycle, excuse me, and that the individuals have the extended one. That's the initial thought. They quite often argue me down on stuff, so let's see.
That's good. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Brian. Before I move on to Agenda G, members, anybody for a break? I don't think so. Let's take a small break. I hope you all don't mind. We're on a break. 10 minutes. Driver Training Traffic Safety Advisory Committee is back on. What time is that, 11:09? Thank you so much. We have our next agenda item is item number G, discussion and update possible action on progress of the work group regarding rule amendments, including but not limited to safeguards to prevent unauthorized production or misuse of electronic course completion certificates and modifications to the program of instruction. We're talking about the driving safety certificates. Okay. Hey, Mark.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and of course our newest member. My name is Mark Gladney. I'm with the General Counsel's Office for TDLR. I'm here to sort of briefly discuss the, not close enough. To discuss the mock-up that you have been given related to Uniform Certificate of Completion for a driving safety course that course providers would be providing. And this is done to implement Senate Bills 848 and 912, which authorize the option for course providers to provide these certificates in an electronic manner. Pursuant to the committee's directive in the last meeting, we had a work group that met on April 13th of this year to discuss rule amendments to Chapter 84 of the DES rules, and we'll get to that in a later agenda item. And as a result of that work group, we came up with the mock-up which each one of you have right now in your super secret envelopes. Ford Strawn was up here a few minutes ago and discussed some of the issues related to the course certificates and what had come out as a result of the work group. And what we're asking for today is your input and suggestions and comments on what you think about the mock-up that the work group came up with during our meeting. Our big concern here was not only to comply with the legislation that brought these certificates into being, but to allow for adequate security of the certificates, since they're going to be printed ultimately by the end user student on their own private printers, and also to provide the courts that are going to rely upon these documents some assurance on the validity of the content, and also to provide flexibility to the course providers in transmitting these certificates, or at least allowing the students to have access securely in order to obtain this. That's basically what we're asking for at this particular time, is not necessarily you to approve these right now, but to give us some more insight as to what you think about the mock-up that has been provided to you.
Well, I know we have some questions. Great work, by the way, Mark. I had an opportunity to see this earlier. The certificate looks fantastic. We'll start off with some questions or recommendations.
Nina Saint with Safeway Driving on page, it's not number, but B9.
B9.
Yeah.
Oh, are you referring to the rule right now?
Yes, to the rules.
Okay. Because we were going to take up the rule at the agenda item.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
Right now, I'd kind of prefer to just talk about what you think about the mock-up. Do you have any suggestions on that?
Okay, I do have a suggestion on the mock-up, is to use the instructor's TDLR number instead of the instructor name. And I know it's been instructor the whole time, but that alleviates people trying to look up the instructor in a phone book or whatever.
Right. Nina, that's right. We are using that 4-digit number, but you're right. On the certificate, this one here, the mock, it does say the instructor's driver's license. Does it? I'm sorry. I was looking at the student. You're recommending, Nina, that it's added?
In lieu of, actually.
So where it says instructor, last name, first name, you're looking for the TDLR number instead?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Glenn Winningham, Mr. Gladney. Overall, this is really good. Just two things. One, I see there's color on here. The color may be an issue for people printing them out at home that just have a standard black ink printer. So as long as you just need to make sure that it's acceptable if it's not in color.
It's my understanding that the end user student, you're left up to the devices of whatever the end user student has. If they have a color printer and they want to print in color, great. If they don't, it's going to be black and white. That being said, certainly the content and the ability of the court to verify the information that's on there, I think that's paramount at this particular juncture. But we don't have any control over how the student prints this thing up.
Okay.
This is Brian Francis interjecting two things. Mark, you got to get closer to that mic.
Oh.
We've had some reports that people can't hear you. The other thing is that we're definitely going to get in touch with what we're calling the end users, the courts, and we're going to get with them and see what is acceptable and workable. Right now, there's some presumption on our part of what they may like and what they may accept. So we'll have conversations between now and the next meeting with the court administrator board as well as some of the court systems to make sure that what we produce meets that end, as well as the insurance groups. We'll coordinate with them to make sure that our final product meets their expectations as well.
And there have been some preliminary discussions with various courts as to what they think should be included, what's important, what's not quite so important. But yeah, as Brian was saying, we are going to expand that in order to get as much input from them as we possibly can.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thanks again for all your work. This is David Bruce, by the way. And I think checking with the courts is a great idea because, again, they're the ones that are put in the spot to verify, and they've got long lines and they want it to move quickly, and they have a lot of responsibility on their hands. Going back to the color comment, and then also the name of the certificate being the uniform certificate, meaning they, in my opinion, kind of in our work group, they should all look the same. So what I would propose for discussion, or just put it for people to think about, is since we do know, at least I think it's fair to assume, some of the end users, being the students, may not have a color printer at their house. So some will be printed in black and white. And if that's the case, I would put it out for thought or conversation that all the certificates are designed to be printed in black and white. So again, from the end user being the court, and you're going to verify what they really want, they know what to expect. Because I envision if they're getting 15 or 20 in color and then they get one in black and white, there could be a pause. Is this real or not? And so I just put that out for conversation or for thought. That's great.
And Brian Francis, I'll add to this, and I'll try to be consistent with my ability to say things, but not really make sense when I say them. It would really be helpful if folks up here can identify the courts that we really need to talk to, those that are going to be big users, and those that have been persnickety users, those that have maybe had a higher rejection rate based on, oh, I don't know if this works, or not sure about it. Not now, not there from the microphone, but you have work groups that you can provide some information that will help us survey the right folks so that we can get the best answer on it. Mr. Bruce, thanks for your information. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And this is Carlos Reina. I was on the work group committee. There were a couple of issues that were discussed. Number one was the fact that the number one intent to do fraud with these certificates is for the court to change the court so they can try to use a certificate for more than one court. We had discussed the possibility of the court name being actually screened in the background behind the verbiage there. So whiting that out is not going to happen. Okay, that was one thing. Secondly, I think we discussed, you all brought up the fact that you were working on a method for a court to be able to get online and verify that certificate number, which is why we're changing a rule to require we submit our data more often. But that's not noted in the language there anywhere. Was that going to be added later, or to tell the court that, hey, you can get online and you can verify it this way?
To answer that question, and I think Ford may have touched on it a little bit about the validation system, and he may have to come up here and speak a little bit more on that, but there has been certainly discussion of the creation of a validation system whereby the courts can check behind the certificate to make sure that, you know, this is authentic. You know, the defendant before them is the person who took this course. They took it at this particular place at this particular time. You know, that is a system that is going to be underpinning this whole process.
Sir, Glenn Whittingham, right down on the bottom where it says you have reason to believe the certificate's not valid, you know, to file a complaint. I believe what Carlos is alluding to is, you know, right there would be instruction for the court personnel or the student to access the validation system right there instead.
Michael Strawn, Education Examination, and Glenn and Carlos, you're absolutely correct, and that's why I came up here. That's something that, the perfect example of what Brian's saying and Mark is asking for, something I can easily incorporate into here, and I do believe that we did discuss that. It wasn't in the notes, but I'll make sure that that's something that we can definitely add in here. We've already done some language changes as far as the contact information below to be more inclusive of everything, website links, and so I think that providing those courts with that information, while we don't necessarily have that website link up right now, we can put a placeholder on this document to know exactly where that's going to fit and what it's going to look like. But that's just definitely, no matter what message we get out to the courts, if they forget a link or whatever, they have it right there on that certificate in hand, and I think that's invaluable and a great suggestion.
Yeah, this is Carlos Wayne again. I think since we're concerned about courts, how they respond, react, giving them this avenue, I think would eliminate a whole bunch of discomfort for them, and they'd accept these certificates a lot easier if they can immediately check it right there on the spot. So I really strongly support that. And again, a way for the average person not to be able to change that court information, because that's the number one, like we discussed in the work group meeting, that's the number one fraud that takes place, someone trying to do that.
Okay. Are there any other suggestions, comments?
Blake Garrett, in the work group, well, first off, thank you all. This is an awesome step forward. In the work group, we briefly discussed adding the actual penalty with forgery. Did you all have more discussion around that behind the scenes?
I do remember at the work group that we did discuss that, you know, certainly, you know, if you alter this, you're tampering with a government record, and I believe that's a Class A misdemeanor, so there's possible criminal penalties associated with that. Of course, then there's perjury, and then there's also a provision in statute that also allows felony punishment. You know, we do have the warning down there. That might be something we may have to beef up a little bit to discourage people. You know, that's certainly a good suggestion, and we'll take a look at the warning down there and see whether or not we can include, you know, that, you know, possible violation of this could result in criminal penalties. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Carlos Wayne again, if you just keep it short and sweet so they take the time to read it, I think that'll get a lot of people's attention.
Anything else?
And Michael Strawn with Education Examination. I just wanted to add one more piece into this as well. We talk about the security of this document, and again, that seems to be paramount, and you know what we've heard voiced several times today. Some of the other things we've incorporated into here are low-tech countermeasures for combating the ability to reproduce a certificate. We talk about not using whiteout and backgrounds, but if somebody just wanted to create a certificate from scratch, there's subtle keys in here, such as font changes with certain letters that somebody who
Do
knows.
not announce our techniques.
I've not pointed them out, but
All right, okay, I'm sorry.
but there are low-key technology things in here that where somebody who knows how to produce the document and has the background information in here can identify if the courts do have a question about the validity of that certificate outside of the validity tool or validation tool or anything else, that somebody can put eyes on and has that skill set to look at and determine if it is authentic or reproduced, that oftentimes people will miss.
Carlos Rannigan, on the website, if someone's able to check the number, will it identify the student that it was assigned to?
Yes, sir. The idea is that it will identify the student in some capacity. There's of course PII to worry about, but also the court that it's intended for as well, and other information that can be used to tie it as specifically to that exact certificate as possible.
Perfect.
So then, even if they did modify the certificate to change from court here in Travis County to one in Harris County, that once it's plugged into the validation tool, they can say, no, this certificate number comes back to a completely different county.
Yeah, because I believe that would go a long way in someone trying to get creative, because you've got to come up with a number and it's got to match the student. It's got to be on the website. That right there is going to defeat a whole bunch of them.
Yes, sir.
Ricardo Benavides, Chair. We have on our certificates right now courts wanting to verify validity of the student's information can call. I know that I had mentioned that earlier. We actually have course provider, email, and customer service there. I think that maybe we might want to consider adding that line there. It gives the courts the ability to just pick up the phone, and they want to verify, they can do that right there. And then, of course, whatever system is in place has always worked very well. I wanted to just quickly, do we make a motion to make all these recommendations? Margaret, you're writing them down.
I'm writing them down.
The reason being is these are all great information. Nina mentioned again to consider the TDLR number, the instructor number, as opposed to the instructor. I want to make sure that you got that, and then of course the color, the validation, and of course adding that penalty I think is fantastic. It'll give a student at least a moment of pause if they see specifically, as opposed to just warning it's a crime to submit the certificate to a court. It'd be nice if it said the actual law or something. You could go to jail for 5 years if you do that. You see what I'm saying? Something
Yes.
that would say something like that, I think would be great. There you go, I get a second on that. All right.
Along those lines, Mr. Chairman, you'd mentioned course provider, email, and customer service information. I don't know, maybe we could bold that or put in there to court personnel, course provider email and customer service information. Something to let the court personnel know, hey, this is what you can do if you want to check out the validity of the certificate.
We have that now, and it works fantastic. We actually have courts that pick up the phone and say, we just wanted, this has to me, or it's got a coffee stain on it or something, and so they'll call. I think it makes them feel very comfortable that they're able to quickly do that, and they do.
Yeah, but I think the thing here is that y'all are on the front line. I mean, certainly we're going to hear some things about this certificate when it gets out there in the public domain. And you may be hearing from courts, or we might be whatever, but the proof is in the pudding as to whether or not we're going to see a lot of fraud being committed on this. And obviously, if it gets to a tipping point, then we're probably going to have to revisit this and change it up a little bit, and maybe add some more security measures. We obviously can't get like the U.S. Treasury and put holograms on this thing and a little micro tape and all that. We just don't have the ability necessarily to do that. But if necessary, I guess we're going to have to change it if it turns out that it's just rampantly running around. And y'all out there in the marketplace probably know how much this is actually happening.
Blake Garrett, one more comment, just maybe a different point of view from Carlos. You know, I think there's about 600,000 driver safety certificates issued a year. So even at 1% of courts potentially calling, that's 6,000 calls to, businesses those are expensive phone calls. I would personally love to see if the certificate could direct them to the new portal, and maybe on the new portal, it pulls up the course information or the course provider information. And if a follow-up phone call is needed, that would be a better place to put that customer support number. I would love to train to go towards the portal.
So Michael Strawn, E&E. So Blake, if I hear you correctly, you're suggesting to remove the line on the certificate about the course provider, email, and customer service number, and then just in that place, we would link to the validity tool, and the validity tool there would provide the course provider's contact information should the courts have additional information or questions.
Maybe it's worth more discussion, but I think that would be ideal.
I just want to make sure I understood you correctly.
I like it.
Okay.
Nina Saint, is there a suggestion that all course providers, whether they use electronic means to issue it or mail means to issue it, use the same certificate? The answer to that is if yes, has anybody checked to see if the student's address will show up in the window envelope properly?
So the idea was originally that, yes, being a uniform certificate of completion, that all of the certificates would begin to look the same. Cause was not given for the mailing of the envelope window. That's, it's something that maybe was not inside of the work group's focus originally, that the work group would need to look at, and you all would need to look at how important that would be to the course providers. We'd have to get feedback from them as well, because that's something that could be solved by not having windowed envelopes and it's printed onto the actual envelope itself, or moving that around. There's a lot of ways that can be incorporated outside of just a windowed envelope, and so we would need to take a look at that to determine if maybe this structure needs to be different for that cause.
Extra time, extra cost, but also that the court information does not show up if they use a window envelope.
David Bruce, let me just kind of jump in. So Nina, the thought was in the work group was that regardless of how the certificate is being sent out, regular mail, electronic, or whatever, it would be the same look and feel. So yes. So once we, again, for thought or consideration, once we determine exactly what is going to be on the certificate, I think we can very quickly get together and move things around to make it fit. There's enough room, so I don't see that being a huge issue, but you bring up a very good point.
Michael Strawn, Education Examination. So the typical envelope that is used is a number 11 windowed envelope, I'm assuming?
Yeah, they're going to be number 10 or 11 windows, or 6 by 9. They'll be like halved.
Okay.
Like this, like a 6 by 9, or it shows up like that, a 6 by 9 window.
And are you aware if the windows for a 6 by 9 and the window for...
Pretty close.
They're very close? Okay.
Okay, is there anything else?
Kevin, you're wanting these back, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Also need your fingerprint, too.
You got it. It's right on the left corner.
We might need to take a blood sample, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gladly. You make me proud.
It's a tough place.
Oh, who you telling?
Tough place.
I'm really in charge, not in control.
Well, in answer to your question, I don't believe that we're going to need a motion on this. We're at the discussion phase, and it seems like y'all have a lot of extra things that you want to see put in here. So what I would suggest is that we go back, staff goes back, and we take these suggestions, we rework these things, and at the next meeting, we come back with the changes that you suggested, and hopefully we have something that y'all are going to fully approve.
Yes, Dave.
Again, David Bruce, thanks again. I mean, you put in a lot of work. This is a very important subject and topic, so thanks for the entire team doing so much effort. I say that. If we can get this a few days prior to the sample of the rework certificate, because what we can do is kind of put it through our frontline team, the team that's put them through just see how it works through everyone's systems. And then I think we can give you some some very solid feedback pretty quickly if we can do that. But I know you've worked countless hours and the time is tight, but a few days prior to the next meeting, I think we'll be very prepared to give some solid feedback.
We definitely want to put the timing on the front end to avoid some of the consternation and just gotchas on the back end. So we'll do that, and I would anticipate that we would have another work group discussion, just to have that in between as well as that intermediate touch. We can't put enough time on this. Let's get it done right. Take the time on the front end, we'll get it done.
Get a nap. And I think that's important, but I'm thinking another 3 months before, I mean, it didn't sound like too many changes, but we're going to wait 3 months to
Let's see
look
what
at it again.
the courts say. I think it's important to make sure that those end users, that their voices are, and I know staff has reached out to a few of them, but I want to make sure that their voices are reflected in this document. If we can avoid, if you had just put this on there, or if you had just put this language on there, I want to make sure that they're heard. And also, I want to touch the insurance groups as well, just to make sure that those end users are getting what they want from this as well.
Ricardo Benavides, Chair. What's the time frame on the certificate? What is it that we're looking at as far as when can we see the certificate being used? Do we have an idea? Next month? Obviously, I'm just kidding when I say next month, but, this year?
You mean for your preview?
No, I mean.
Or just out in the public domain?
Right. When can we start?
I think
What's the idea?
When we're comfortable and ready.
Okay.
One of the commitments that I made during the session, and we're sticking with it, and I'm grateful to the staff for doing that, is we want to make sure that everyone is comfortable, that we have a process. We don't have to rush to do it. So let's take our time, and when it's ready to be released, if that is in August, if it's in September, if it's in October, it'll definitely be before this calendar year, but I want to make sure that those little inside the belly fuzzies that are going on, that we've covered that base. I also want to make sure that, the folks that can just distribute it electronically directly to the court. You've already addressed it, I mean, I want to make sure that those things are addressed too, that we cover, cross all of our Ts and dot our Is.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Glenn Winningham, I'm not trying to rush the process at all. I do want to bring up, though, that, it's been brought to a lot of our attention that there are current course providers that are providing PDF certificates right now that are being given to the courts. And all that's doing, the way that these rules have been written, and we're going through this entire process of a uniform certificate of completion, that's just causing confusion for courts right now that are accepting these PDF certs when they're going to look entirely different when we blast this out. So it does need to happen so those course providers that are doing that currently can comply with rule. I understand that there's only so much you all can do because it's in the statute in regards to enforcing someone to not do so, but that's more of a reason to push it along.
And I think that's where, having contact with the courts is extremely important because, they'll know, hey, there's something coming down the pike here, and it's going to be a uniform certificate. It's not going to be these PDFs that are floating around, running around. They're going to look way different. So if the greater judiciary, world is aware of what's going on, then, that's going to probably go a long way in solving a lot of the issues.
Yeah. The TMCEC would have a lot to do with that as well. I know that Ford is aware of that organization.
And we'll, if another work group meeting is necessary, then we'll get in touch with y'all and set something up.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Nina Saint, to be consistent across, I mean, the end user that gets this emailed to them will print it out on plain paper. So will the course providers that are still mailing them need to print it out on security paper, and then use plain paper also?
That's it. Security paper.
Michael Strawn, Education Examination. To answer your question, Ms. Saint, we had not intended to change the paper certificate that was mailed, the standards for it as far as the weight of the paper or use of security paper. As this focus in the work group was for the design and implementation of the electronic certificate mostly. But I think that's something that, again, we would have to put up for discussion to determine the importance of that. You know, that information for those certificates would still need to be validated as well. And so, again, if we're going to change the security paper and take away security from the mailed version, then it needs to be adequate and up to par with everything else we're doing for the security of that document as well. So I think that's something we need to give discussion to before we would change the printed certificate.
Well, think about it, because it won't be consistent. You'll have two separate certificates.
David Bruce, on that point, in my opinion, which we all have opinions, but if we really can have a consistent look and feel for the certificate, and I view the electronic certificate as just another delivery method, so the court, if it goes well, the court should not know or should not truly care how the student received their certificate. The court should just be able to look at it, in my opinion, and say this is what Ford and TDLR communicated that it's going to look like. Here's a number I can call, a website I can go to call to verify if I want to, and they know what to get. So if they get some with security paper and some without, it just seems to be more trying for them. I mean, you'll learn more when you speak to them, but it just seems to be more trying for them.
And I think, this is Mark Gladney, I think that the communication with the courts, if it does come to a situation where some would be on security paper and some would not, if we inform the court, you may receive some certificates that are printed on a regular computer printer. It may not be security paper, or the ones that they get through the mail are going to be otherwise. That at least puts them on notice that, there's going to be some difference when they grab that piece of paper and they start feeling it.
I agree.
Kevin Knapp, but doesn't that negate the whole purpose for a uniform certificate of completion?
It depends on what you mean by uniform. Are you talking about uniform in content, or are you talking about uniform in content and, just the entire look and feel of the thing?
Okay. Uniform to me means it's completely uniform. Everything is the same.
Okay.
And I'm thinking that's probably what the court would think.
Mhm.
So, just for.
Well, we'll find out when we reach out a little bit more.
Brian Francis, so the current paper that's being produced on, is that paper that the companies are purchasing and have purchased in bulk? I know that this guy lost at least 3 inches of hair when we changed the, it may have been the consumer complaint information for our electrician program, because people had already pre-printed the language, and we wanted to add, the web page that people could go to file a complaint, and people were like, oh my gosh, I've already spent $562.36 on these pre-printed cards. And so it's something that I definitely want to factor in. If small businesses have already purchased X, then we can probably anticipate that when we say go, that there's going to be using of that stock that's in place. But we'll continue to talk about it, but that's a real issue for some of the businesses that have already invested in that paper, and maybe they found a great deal 6 years ago, and they got 45,000 pieces of paper on it. So we'll just be mindful of that. That'll be an issue that we'll talk about. But I agree with your definition of uniform.
Anyone else? Any other comments, questions? Mark, Michael, anything else?
I'd just like to close by saying, many thanks to the staff members who worked on this, as well as the committee members, committee member Rena, Bruce, Winningham, and Garrett. Great information from y'all. I certainly learned a lot, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. If we can continue, if you all don't mind, members, we're going to go with item H. This is a discussion, possible recommendations on proposed new rules, proposed amendments. This is in regards to Senate Bill number 30, Senate Bill 1051. I think we were actually talking about this earlier, but I think we're going to get some meat substance. So agenda H is what we're at.
Good morning again, Mark Gladney, Assistant General Counsel.
I love it.
Yes, Mr. Chair, E&E, Angie and Ray came up here and had some discussion with regard to the Community Safety Education Act and the American Sign Language video that was brought about by Senate Bill 1051. Senate Bill 30 was the Community Safety Education Act, and I've been told to use the whole term.
That's good.
All right. Basically, some of the highlights, the proposed rules that are in your packet, they implement both the aforementioned Senate bills and the Community Safety Education Act adds a requirement to include information related to law enforcement procedures for traffic stops and all driver education, driver safety school curriculum. Also, Senate Bill 1051 requires driving safety schools to include accommodations for deaf and or hard of hearing students, and for the department to develop an online driver education course in American Sign Language. So the proposed rules in your packet are designed to implement both SB 30 and SB 1051. We've noted the specific changes that have been made to the rule sections that are in your packet. The proposed rules were published in the Texas Register on March 30th. The public comment period closed April 30th. We received what might be termed as a comment during the 30-day period. It was more of a question. It was just basically inquiring about what students would be taught on proper law enforcement protocol at traffic spots or in-person encounters with a peace officer. We did note, the staff noted that we addressed the comment by pointing to the bill and specifically the minimum requirements of instruction that are noted in the Education Code, specifically sections 28.012 and 1001.109. It was also noted that public input on the areas of instruction would be solicited through public comment and work groups. And we also noted that the Civilian Interaction Training Program under Occupations Code Chapter 1701 requires peace officers to complete that training, and the minimum standards of instruction, minimum requirements, are the same minimums that are required by the driver education and the driver safety courses. So there'll be consistency there. Those are the minimums. Certainly more can be offered, but statutorily the minimum requirements are the minimum requirements required. Angie and Ray also noted to you the status of the video that's currently being produced. So it seems as if they're certainly on the right track, and we'll have a video completed by the statutory deadline. At this point, the staff is requesting a recommendation of adoption to the Commission of the proposed rules without changes, with an effective date of the rules of July 1st.
This is Carlos Reyna. I'd like to make a motion that these rules be forwarded for review and adoption to the commission on their next meeting.
Thank you, Carlos. We have a motion on the floor, members. Anybody?
Kevin Knapp, second.
Thank you, Kevin. Quick vote. All those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
A question. Mark, the effective date is July 1st.
Yes.
Does that mean we have to have the traffic stop information in the curriculum by that date, or on completion of the curriculum content that's the committee's working on? Ray and Angie.
Pardon, I didn't get that question.
So July 1st is going to be the implementation date?
That's the effective date, Brian Francis.
The effective date.
So just very clearly, Nina, the statutory effective date is going to drive it. So September 1 is when the curriculums need incorporated. This is just getting the rules in place.
Yes, yes.
Great question. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Oh, fantastic. Any questions, comments, members? Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. We'll move on to the next item. Item I, discussion and possible recommendation on the proposed rules. This is Senate Bill 848 and 912, House Bill, regarding the option of electronic delivery of uniform certificate of completion, which we were just talking about earlier.
Okay. Once again, Mark Gladney, Assistant General Counsel. Before you in your briefing booklets, we have the proposed rule amendments to Chapter 84, specifically Subchapter E 8461 and 8463. And we also have amendments to Subchapter K 84-300, 301, and 302. These rule amendments are necessary to address proposed program fee reductions and to implement Senate Bill 848 and House Bill 912, which relate to electronic issuance of course completion certificates by driving safety course providers to its students. So as part of this rule, we are proposing creation of two new rule sections, 84.61B9 and B10. Other sections amendment, of course, 8461, 84.63, 84.300, 84.301, and 302. Okay. In the past, the advisory committee has worked diligently with the staff to streamline the rules in rulemakings prior to this one, and the proposed amendments 84.61 and 63 are also a byproduct of the April 13th work group discussion. The rule changes in total are intended to address the reduction in program fees, in regulating the industry, and to implement the requirements from the aforementioned bills as it relates to electronic issuance of electronic certificates of course completions. At this particular time, the staff is requesting a recommendation from the committee to publish the proposed rule changes as presented.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we can go through
Yes.
these section by section or have the
Well,
conversation.
that's what I was going to ask, Brian. I wanted to make sure, because I had an opportunity to look at it. Members, anybody have any questions or comments in regards to the changes?
Yes.
We can walk through them if you want.
We can, absolutely. Nina, you had a comment, question?
Yes, I started a while ago, but now I'm the timely part. Nina Saint, in number 9, B9, 84.61B9. So 9 says submit a plan for electronic issuance of uniform certificates of course completion, comma, prior to implementation, comma, for approval by the department. And then it kind of goes with 10, and then 10 is issue uniform certificate of course completions comply with the certificate design specifications approved by the department. So is that enough language? And you can let me know, because I can submit a plan, but it doesn't mean I'm going to use that plan. Because it doesn't say I had to use the plan, I just had to submit it. So is that enough language that whatever plan a course provider submits, that they will need to follow that?
I think the intent here was you would submit a plan which would be reviewed by staff and then approved by staff, and then you would use that plan. That's the impression that I get from B9.
Yeah, and just because you need approval first, it might need to read, submit a plan for the electronic issuance of uniform certificates of course completion for approval by the department, comma, prior to its implementation.
Okay, so you're talking about just moving that language here.
So it needs to be approval.
Excellent point.
Okay.
And Nina, I'm looking in the direction of our enforcement guru. Does that rewording of it give you more?
I think I'm comfortable with her.
Okay, great. Nina, you used to be a regulator, didn't you?
What's that?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe.
I love it.
I'm not a lawyer, but I sometimes read this stuff. In 10, issue uniform certificates of course completion that comply with the certificate design specifications approved by the department and in the approved plan. Do those two need to be connected somehow, the plan and the certificate? Or are those two different concepts?
This is David Bruce. Nina, that might be picked up in section 11.
Well, I mean,
As long as, there's enough for enforcement, I'm just put the questions out there.
It's good.
And then, so I got the answer to 12, because I had great concern why we went from 30 days to 5. In issuance, that's a lot of time, but again, with the validation process, I understand that. But a lot of students are gonna take this the same day they receive that email to the court. So is within 5 days enough? The court's gonna get it immediately? I know it's within, so it can be done as soon as it's issued.
Mark, what gives us the most leeway in terms of publishing the rules? Because part of the publishing process is to give us the conversation, like, oh, if it's 30 days, so if we put it 5 days, if we get recommendations to move it in the other direction?
you mean increase the number of days?
Yeah, so what gives us the most flexibility to get as much information, the best information, to where we can pivot either way?
Yeah, I don't see any problem with necessarily increasing the number of days if that's an issue.
If we get comments to that effect, will we be able to make that change as the rules are published?
Well, we can make the changes if there's if we get comments on that, we can certainly make changes.
We've got enough flexibility. Okay. Then now let's see what questions or comments come in. I think that'll be instructive.
All right, my last question, at this moment, is 16. And I know this is not with any change, but since it's on here, I've never understood why we had a cap at $10 for a duplicate uniform certificate of completion. That does not cover the cost of issuing that at all. And I don't know if there's any possibility of increasing, or just take, if we issue it incorrectly, the next part of the statement says we can't charge them at all. But for somebody that lost their certificate, and I'm gonna issue a duplicate, all that I can recoup on that is $10?
Again, that may be something that we could get comments
I
on.
need to
as
make a comment.
well.
I will.
This is Carl Traina. I thought I heard that it's statutory that we cannot exceed it. Is it supported by statute, or was that just?
Oh, there's a nod of that's true coming from Della. So the statute said it was an ordinance. We'll get that section number soon. Thank you, Dylan.
Brian?
Yes, sir.
Carlos Reyna, strategic planning?
Yeah, that could be
Consideration.
a question that comes in there. Yeah.
Glenn Winningham on 84.301, the driving safety fees. And I'm not gonna, if anybody wants to comment from driver ed, they can on these. But, I see on, number 4 at the bottom, the fee for a course completion certificate number is $1. By putting the dollar in the rule, does that in any way pigeonhole TDLR into not being able to ever, I'm gonna say it real quick, increase that fee if you all's cost to monitor this program goes up, then you have to change the rule again?
We'd have to do it by rule, but we have the authority to go up to $4, so we're comfortable with it being here.
Right, in the statute, so so I understand that, but I'm just asking them, why wouldn't you just put not more than 4 in the rule?
Part of it is just the transparency to let the industry know what it is, what the cost is today, and
Okay.
even have the conversation about when we decide, did you hear that already? When we decide to increase it.
Okay, just a question.
By using that particular firm number, we can do financial analysis on there. If we did, say, not more than 4, then it kind of makes the numbers kind of go all over the place.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman? David Bruce. Staying on the fees, y'all done a great job lowering a good number of fees across the board for driver education and driver safety. I do have a question, and Glenn did bring it up. Right now, all course providers are paying $1 to receive a number from your agency. And you've lowered fees such as course approval, which takes a number of man-hours from $9,000 to $1,200. The driver safety course approval, $9,000 to $1,200. Application for a course provider from $2,000 to $750. So you've moved huge numbers around to help the industry. Could there be consideration to lower the cost per number for the certificate? Because again, we're getting a list of numbers from the agency.
There could be. I will tell you why we did not, is we looked at what our revenue is coming in and what our expenses are, and we evaluated how much of a cushion we have right now. This gets us probably about 55% of the way into that cushion. We could not afford, with the volume on the certificates and the numbers, it's a primary funding mechanism for your industry. What we try to do is have changes and fee reductions here that reached individuals and companies, but that dollar it's the key part of funding for your group. And to have gone down with the volume, I mean, there's a difference in changing a fee where you may have 4 new licensees coming in at the $9,000 versus dropping that to 50 cents, and there's 600,000 of those. We would not have been able to eat that.
Okay, thank you. I just thought I'd ask.
No, I appreciate it.
And as a reminder, we do have to make sure that our fees cover the administrative costs of running the program by statute, so.
Blake Garrett, question about, so was there a fee discussed for parent-taught driver's ed providers?
There was. We just don't have statutory authority to do it. And I think y'all have been with the program longer than we have. Historically, however it came about, there just wasn't a fee enumerated in there. My staff works just as hard on reviewing those courses as they do the other courses, but with no authority. As I always say, you'd have a new person in this seat if I were to put a fee on that group. It's just one of those anomalies.
Any other questions or comments?
So then, Mark, you're needing to, this is Ricardo Benavides, Chair. You're needing, you're recommending that we consider a motion then for the rule amendments on this one, but with those changes, or?
I believe it was with the change to 8461B9.
And 8463, basically adding. Those two
There was a suggestion to change the language in B9 to submit a plan for the electronic issuance of uniform certificates of course completion for approval by the department prior to its implementation.
Excellent. Anything else, members? You want to add on there before we consider a motion?
And did that language match your suggested change? Sorry, this is Brian Francis. They did, okay.
Fantastic. All right, members, I'll consider a motion to adopt these rules.
With the change as proposed?
With the changes, thank you so much, Mark, with the changes that were proposed. Members? Thank you so much, Nina. We have a motion on the floor, members. Anybody second?
I second it.
Carlos, Reina, thank you so much for seconding that. All right, we'll take a vote. I guess everybody that is in agreement with the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries to adopt. Okay, anything else, Mark?
No, that's it.
Thank you so much. Our next item is going to be J. Item J, I'm just curious, do we take a quick little break, or, right? I'm not really sure how long this will take. I don't want to rush the next one, I think that's Ron. Right? We're going to take a quick little break, and then we'll come back.
Mark, you did a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. This committee is back in. We are now in order. The time is, I think it's noon?
12:22.
Is it 12:22? I couldn't see it right. 12:22 is when we're starting. Thank you. Excellent. We are going to start with item, Ron, I'm sorry about that. We're going to start with item number J, discussion and possible action to recommend approval of the penalty matrix for the driver education and traffic safety program. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman. I'm Ron Foster. I did need that break, so I appreciate the extra time.
Thank you.
I think we're going to be ready to go here. So, Ron Foster, Senior Prosecutor, Enforcement Division. Been working in Enforcement Division since 2009, so I've seen a couple of these enforcement plans go by. I'm going to be assisted today by Chris Russey, our analytics specialist and general guru in chief, okay? I'm going to, my apologies, this may be a little bit repetitious because I'm going to repeat some information some of y'all might have previously heard, just for the benefit of all of the members, okay? The prosecution section ensures the proper disposition of each case when the evidence reflects violations. The prosecutor may pursue administrative penalties or license sanctions, or we may resolve those cases informally, if that's warranted by the circumstances. Now, when the evidence does not indicate violations, we generally just close the case. When an enforcement action leads to a hearing, that prosecutor presents the department's case to the State Office of Administrative Hearings. We call that SOA. And the commission of the license of this department, licensing regulation, will make the final determination on the case, the final decision. Now, consistency in the investigation and resolution of the complaints is an essential element of effective enforcement. Our division works to ensure consistency using the guideline documents, such as the enforcement plan, to ensure that the penalties and sanctions are consistent. Now, what does it do? The enforcement plan describes the ranges of penalties and the license sanctions that are applicable to specific alleged violations of the statutes and rules that we enforce. In this particular program, the maximum penalty is $1,000, which is different than most of our programs, which has a maximum penalty of $5,000 per violation per day. I believe that is based upon a commitment that our Executive Director, Brian Francis, made. Now, working together, this board's enforcement work group and department's enforcement division collaborated to create the document that we call the enforcement plan. This document, you will hear me call it the penalty matrix or enforcement plan. I use those interchangeably. It means the same document, okay? Before we begin, I would like to give special thanks to the board members who participated in the enforcement work group with us. Presiding Officer Ricardo Benavides, Francis Gomez, Carlos Reyna, and Nina Saint. We in enforcement appreciate your contributions and the unique perspectives that you brought to the table. Your guidance provided us with a lot of information that we learned about your industry, and it's invaluable. So this is a little bit of a presentation, not like that first one, so I'm trying to get through a lot of information here. Okay, so if you will make sure you go to agenda item tab J, that's where the draft is, okay? I'm going to give you a little bit of the background on what the draft of the penalty matrix. As I said, it has multiple purposes, this enforcement plan, this penalty matrix. One, it's used to put the industry and the public on notice on what the penalties and sanctions are in your program. Anyone can go to the website where this enforcement plan will be published. It's required to be published there. And they'll be able to look on your program page and figure out what the penalties are for any particular violation. They'll be able to look it up. It'll have the code sites, all the information that you see in the printed format, it'll be there. Now, It's also used by our prosecutors as guidance. When an attorney decides to issue a notice of alleged violation, what we call an NOV, that is a formal charging instrument saying that someone did something wrong, okay? The enforcement plan sets out the range in which the prosecutor is required to set the penalty. They can't go outside of that range. That's part of the process that we have of looking at it and categorizing everything, is to try to determine the seriousness of it. So generally, the prosecutors, they are bound by this enforcement plan. However, there are exceptions. A prosecutor may go outside of the range that's identified in the enforcement plan with the approval of our director, our enforcement director, Christina Kaiser. That's done on a case-by-case basis based upon the specific facts of a particular case. Also, I will note that the commission is not required to set the penalty based upon the enforcement plan. They can go outside of it as well. They usually don't. Okay. What the enforcement plan is not. So I say that because there are a few common misconceptions with the enforcement plan. And some of those in the work group will know this because we kind of talked about it. An enforcement plan does not create new rules. It does not create new law. It is simply a listing of the current laws and rules that are there and put into a format so that they can be classified and categorized, right, for consistency. So, of course, every time the statute changes or the rule changes, that means our enforcement plan gets a little bit, out of date, and things may need to be updated. So this is not a one-time process. We will come back to you in the future as is warranted to make updates. And it's not based solely on the changes in statutes and rules. Those updates or changes can be made based upon feedback that we get from you guys in the field, when things are going on and we're hearing, oh, these particular violations are too high, the penalties are too high, they're too low, you want to be more aggressive, you want to be less aggressive. We can take that into consideration and we can, readjust the enforcement plan. The enforcement plan does not represent every possible outcome that is available in the enforcement division. As I previously said, some of the cases are going to end with closing letters because there's insufficient evidence. So you're not going to need to look at the enforcement plan to make a determination like that. Also, you're going to have cases where a warning, the prosecutor may determine that a warning is appropriate. That may happen when the complainant has made corrections or maybe made the person whole, that maybe they owed them a refund, maybe there was monies that were due. So there are situations the prosecutor tries to take in the totality of those circumstances, look at everything as a whole, but each case individually to make a determination about whether or not it's appropriate to issue the notice of alleged violation or whether or not it can be informally resolved without going through court, without going in front of the commission to make a final determination. It happens quite a lot, actually. So I think it's fair to say the majority of cases probably get handled that way informally. I mentioned this a moment ago, I'll mention it again. Enforcement plan is not binding on the commission, okay? So when a case goes to that formal hearing process, it goes to the State Office of Administrative Hearings and it comes before the commission. The commission is only bound by the limits of the law, which is $5,000 per day per violation. However, they typically abide by what the amounts are in the enforcement plan. They respect your judgment, they respect the resources that went into making that determination, and ultimately they approve this enforcement plan that you're going to hopefully recommend a little bit later. So they understand what goes into that, and they normally make final decisions based upon that enforcement plan as well. One of the reasons I will say that they also do that is because it's just part of what the industry has been put on notice of. If you've got a notice out there that everyone's looking at saying you're going to get a penalty of this much for this type of violation, and then you're somewhere way outside of that, it's kind of out of whack. It doesn't make sense. So as a practical matter, they're going to do that. So wow, I'm going through this pretty quick, so I hope I'm not talking too fast. So this document was created in collaboration with other divisions within the department. I'd like to thank the Office of the General Counsel, and as well as Education and Examination, and of course, the board members that participated. We do appreciate all of the guidance that we got, and this collaboration with the different divisions, it really adds different perspectives so that we can understand that when we're putting these in the right, that we're putting these violations into the right place. So what you see is not what we began with, and I think the other work group members can attest to that. What happened was I began with a draft of the document, which I prepared. I basically just tried to pull all the rules and the laws out of there that I thought looked like a violation. And I organized it, kind of like I said earlier, based upon what I thought from my experience was the seriousness of the violation. And I made a preliminary draft. That was the working draft that we used as a work group, and that was passed out to the work group members. The violations were organized into categories as a starting point, and we kind of moved them around from there. But we're trying to keep in mind that across the enforcement plan, we want to be consistent, and as well as with some of our other programs where we have similar types of violations, we're trying to keep them equivalent to that. So, for example, there may be situations where you have common Class A violations like failure to post a complaint sign or failure to notify the department of a change of address. Typically, that's going to be a Class A violation, one of the lowest level of violations, no matter what program you're in. And that's across all the different. So after the draft was prepared, our enforcement work group met, and the work group members helped us to understand the seriousness of each violation, as it was for the industry. As a result of that discussion, the violations were moved around quite a bit. Some were moved higher, some were moved lower. But we considered the seriousness of the violation. And generally, if you look at the enforcement plan, and you start in A, and you go B, C, D, what you're looking at is, as you get higher, it's going to be more serious type of violation. After the order of the seriousness was determined by our work group members, the work group then determined what the appropriate level of the penalty or sanction was. There was quite a bit of discussion about that, and we wanted to make a little bit of overlap between each class, again, because we wanted to give leeway, some discretion to the prosecutor. Sometimes it's really hard to know whether or not something is, when you're looking at one particular case, is it very serious, less serious? You're looking at the factors. You don't want to charge everyone exactly the same thing. So there's a little bit of overlap there. Now, I'm going to draw your attention to a few elements of this enforcement plan that you will notice when you look through it. Let me get my enforcement plan. So right from the get-go, you're going to see that it's not exact cites of the law and the rules. It's paraphrased. We did that to try to maintain some kind of clarity for the people reading it. We didn't want to just reprint the whole statute and rules verbatim in there and then make it all confusing. So what we did is we tried to identify the key action that was the violation, tried to paraphrase it, but keeping those essential elements, and we phrased it on here, again, keeping in mind that if there's anything inconsistent between the enforcement plan and the law or the rules, the law and the rules are what applies, not the enforcement plan. It doesn't change the law. It doesn't make a new rule.
And Ron, can I just add to that?
Sure.
I know early on, and they have mastered the art of putting these penalty matrices together, but early on, people were thinking, oh, the name and the wording's changed a little bit. This is now the rule. And it's all he's talking about is the language up there, that reference point to the statute and the rule really drives, and that's the connection. We just tried to paraphrase it and not write repeating the rules in the statutory language and having novels in the enforcement plan. So paraphrase a little bit.
It's very good that Brian mentioned that. The citations are there on the right-hand column, and we try to include all of the appropriate citations. So you will see some lines where there are multiple citations. That's because based upon your rules, very often something was mentioned might have been mentioned more than one time. So we try to capture that, and we listed it there when we felt appropriate. You will also notice that in each class there are subject matter headings. And again, this is to try to make it more useful for the public, for the licensees, for our prosecutors when they're using this document to try to find a particular type of violation. Personally, I find it most useful to look at it electronically and do Control F searches, but if you're looking through it on the paper, it'll be helpful to have administrative operations related, what have you, and it's pretty consistent from one class to the next. We didn't try to change up the categories too much. We wanted them to be consistent from Class A to Class B. Now, we did add categories as necessary. We are trying to use common terminology in the enforcement plan. Within this enforcement plan, and you will notice that we have separate enforcement plan documents for the different licensees in your program, but that terminology is also kind of consistent from program to program. I mean, we don't need to call things use different names for things when they're essentially the same thing from one program to another, unless we really have to. So that's again a little bit about the way the document is arranged. Now, lastly, I'm going to mention that you'll notice that the penalty range, that it is a range. It's not a set penalty. That was done purposefully. We believe this is actually simpler. That's our experience talking to us from many, many cases going through the State Office of Administrative Hearings, going through the commission. When we have first-time violations, second-time violations, third-time violations, it gets to be contentious about whether or not a final order was signed on this date or that date, and when it, was it in progress, was it finalized, and then we're in front of the SOA judge, and we're arguing about whether or not it's first or second, when what really matters is the person violated the law. Having a range helps us pay attention. It allows us, as I kind of hit on a moment ago, it gives our attorneys a little bit more discretion. Again, we're looking at it every case on a case-by-case basis. Totality of the circumstances is the way I look at it. Everything that was going on. What was the person intending to do the harm? Did the person try to make corrective actions? Is the person a repeat offender? Anything like that. So having a range, it helps you when you look at it to say, look, that's appropriate. That's on the high end because this person's already done this 2 times before, and they did this to multiple people. That's going to be a higher level violation versus this is the first time that someone had this violation and they were not able to make corrections, but so they're still going to get a penalty, what have you, but it deserves to be on the lower end. So it just gives you more discretion instead of having your hands tied so that everything is like a cookie cutter situation, like every time you give the same penalty. It just doesn't seem appropriate in some situations. Lastly, in regards to that penalty range, I'll say that the department's strategic plan also included goals for the enforcement division the last go-around. And part of that was to focus our attention on consumer harm or threats to the public health and safety. And one of the action steps that we had was to try to simplify, I think it was the wording used was streamline the procedural steps to ensure prompt resolution of complaints. We believe this helps to do that. It's an easier document to look at when you have fewer categories and you don't have so many different ranges. You just have one penalty range there. So my intent with this rather lengthy
Power didn't go out.
my intent with the rather lengthy introduction is to try to give you an understanding, an idea of how this document is organized. And to really give an opportunity for the members that didn't get to review the document or be participating in the work group meeting to understand the mindset that we had in that work group. Now, we can go through this document, and I wanted to note that there are 4 separate sections for you. That was another point I wanted to make to you. You will see that you have the driver education, schools, and instructors enforcement plan. You have one called the driver safety schools and instructors plan. You have the course providers enforcement plan. And then the 4th one that we kind of decided to break these all down into was the drug and alcohol driving awareness programs enforcement plan. So what we can do is we can either go through this, or if you've already had an opportunity to review it and you feel comfortable with it, you can ask me questions. Or if you're even comfortable with that and you don't have any questions, then what I'm asking for is an approval of this, because for a recommendation to our commission to go ahead and adopt this enforcement plan. So I'll take any questions you have.
Kevin Knapp, how important is it to get this out like quickly? And I know I'm on the complete opposite side of where I was a while ago, but I've not seen this document. And so.
Wow. It's very important. Yes, I'm sorry that you didn't get a chance to see it. It is very important that we get this out, but having said that, as I've explained a moment ago, well, earlier today, we've been trucking a while without it. So as I think it's expedient to try to look at it.
Like, could we have a week to look at it?
Well, see,
or-
we need to have a motion and approval
okay.
from the board in order to do that.
Then I'm all for timeline, let's go.
Yeah.
Whatever we need.
I would really like to get this in place. I mean, part of the struggle I had, honestly, with this is because there were so many rules, and the rules were being reworked a number of times, and there was a lot of stuff being added and taken out and changed around. It took me a long time to get to the point where I had the initial draft ready to go. And at this point, I'm even hearing about new rules that are about to come down the pipe. I really would like to get something finalized. And keeping in mind that you can always come back to this later and change it.
Right.
We can keep the enforcement work group active at the pleasure of the chairman, and we can always revisit any concerns that come up.
Kevin Knapp again. Well, I mean, I have been going through it as you've been talking. I mean, it looks good. I don't have a problem with it.
This is Carlos Reyna. Was one of the persons working in the work group, and along with Nina and Ricardo and Francis. And I'm going to tell you that we did a lot of shuffling around. And I think I put in, more time on this than I did anything else to keep it fair. And we took a lot to move them up to minor. We took some of what they thought were minor and said, no, this is a major. I mean, I'm comfortable with what we did. And I'm just, if my word at all is worth anything, I'm going to tell you, I don't think you can find anything in here that you won't like. It's okay. It's a fair document. We try to be as fair as possible. But having said that, I will bring up one issue that I'll need clarification on.
Yes,
okay?
sir.
But I'll let you comment on that.
It's Kevin Knapp again. I trust you guys completely, so. Yeah.
And keep in mind, this is Brian Francis. As Ron said earlier, this is a living, breathing document. And we have gone back to several of our advisory boards to tweak it, to move things around. So it gives us a starting place. It will allow our attorneys, which are doing a great job, but just allow them to have a framework to being consistent and moving forward with complaints. But this is not the end of it, Mr. Knapp. So, we can come back, at the next meeting and say, you know what, I've taken a look at it, and we can start that process.
This is Carlos Reyna again, and so I'll bring up my question, my one item I do want to bring up, because having been in the driver education field for so long, I know there's one issue that will be brought up by driver education schools, and Nina brought it up, and I voiced concern with it too, and that would be on page 2, Class B, under administrative violations.
Yes, Mr.
The
Leonard?
terminology is failed to require a student to complete the 30 hours of behind-the-wheel instruction, okay? Now, the reason I bring that one up is because most driver education schools do not feel that we're responsible for that. But as I've seen, it's statutorily assigned to the driver education school, but there's no way we can verify that they actually did the hours they did. So in speaking with the enforcer and other staff at TDL and R, we came to understand that what we're referring to there is that we didn't at least make sure they understood this process had to be done, but we're not responsible whether it's legal, whether they're falsifying, fraudulent, or anything like that. Okay, that was my understanding, and I just want to clarify that that's correct.
That's my recollection as well. I believe we were having a conversation about whether or not the language initially might have been failed to insure, and we decided that insuring was something you really couldn't do, but
Correct.
making a requirement that it be in your documentation that they do that is really all you could do. So that was my understanding as well.
Correct, because I just wanted to be on record that
Okay.
we said this, and so people understand it, and so I can tell the other driver education school owners, relax, it's okay. You won't be seeing this very often, as long as you're making sure to point out the fact that it has to be done and so forth, provided them the forms if necessary, whatever. You do that, you're in.
I agree with your comment.
Thank you.
Excuse me, this is David Barroso. Just so I'm clear, if we vote approve or whatever that may be, is the next step, does this matrix go out for public comment?
It does not.
It does not, so this
It
is
does
just
not.
adopted immediately?
It's
It
an
goes to the
internal.
commission.
Okay, I'm sorry, thank you for that. Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And
Because
Brian
it's an
Francis-
internal.
Go, please, go.
Because it's an internal document, it actually gives us a little bit more leeway to address any concerns that come from the application of the document. As I mentioned before, having the active enforcement work group and, getting input from the industry, these documents, they tend to change more often than I like just because they have to be reworked, but it can happen.
Okay, thank you for that.
Any other comments, questions? First of all, go ahead, go right ahead.
Blake here, just following up on Carlos's comment. So it's just my understanding, it's statute that we have to use the word require? Like notify because we can't require. Once they do the.
It's required in that it's statutory that the school has to provide this training. It's part of what our training is supposed to be. If we could pull up that language and look at it.
But after a student finishes with the school and those 30 hours are later completed, there's very little relationship between the school and the student at that point.
Yeah, well, I think they went with it because if you look up on the TV screen, the word require is there.
I think, and it
And so
says
it's being
required to
supported in
complete.
statute.
Yeah, it says required to complete, and unfortunately, statutes are not always written.
Okay.
So
In mind with the best way to-
technically, it's part of
Yeah.
our course, even though we're really not doing anything with it because of the way they worded it. Okay, because believe me, I felt the same way.
Yeah.
Okay, but once I saw that, when it's in stone, it's in stone.
This is Kevin Knapp again. So in essence, we're required to notify, but we're not necessarily required to enforce.
Correct.
That was our understanding from the discussion, that it was
We're
more of a,
required
you need to put them
tell
on
them
notice.
it's required.
Yes.
Okay, how's that?
That required to tell them that they must complete something. I mean, you don't have a mechanism in place to make sure that they actually did that.
Carlos ran again, because if we look at it, we're, part of what's required now for a license is the impact course, and it's not part of our driver ed, but if we don't tell them about it, then they can't get their license, so we've got to do that.
That's correct.
Okay.
So since this is an internal document, that's how you referred to it?
Yeah, I meant internally generated type of document, because as I said, it's actually it has to be by law on our website. It doesn't have to be adopted like a rule does, but it's there for everyone to see. So I didn't mean to convey that it was internal in the sense that only us on the inside are using.
It's a guidance
Everybody
document
is
for
using
enforcement.
this guidance document. We have to show it to the judge as evidence when we go and prosecute our cases. We have to show the document to the judge and say, look, this is the type of violation, this is the class it is, this is the penalty that should be assessed.
And it has to be a violation that has to be tied to a statute?
Or a rule.
Or rule.
Mm-hmm. And those are identified on the right-hand column on the document.
I was just curious if there's a way to build in how you were going to enforce it in this document, looking at notification versus required.
Well,
Like, how does it survive?
I think it
beyond
works
you?
because of the discretion of the attorney. You know, as I mentioned in my presentation, the document doesn't mandate that an attorney do X every time something happens. I mean, we're looking at the totality of the circumstances, and I can believe that there would be some communication going back and forth between the attorney or the investigator and the school about the documents and what it said and what was done, and I think that would come through in there. You understand? So if a person was saying, well, look, here's the notification we provided to them, and it turned out that the person actually didn't do what they were told that they needed to do, I don't see how you would be faulting the school on that.
And Committee Member Garrett, a couple of things. This document is not going to be the end-all. Ron is one of the lead prosecutors in enforcement, so it's not just surviving him. He's actually training the other prosecutors underneath him. The other thing is keep in mind is that, just for example, just using Harvey as an example, you have records that may have been destroyed because of Harvey. Complaints filed, and you are required to keep those records for X years, and you don't have them. We are going to factor that variable in there. It's not going to be in the enforcement plan. It's not going to say, you know, if there's a natural disaster or X. That's the discretion that our prosecutors are empowered with, and they do a really good job. What are the, you know, the points that kind of test that process? Now, part of it is that their work goes before the commission, and so the commission is always going to look at it and see if there's consistency in how they're applying it. And the work goes before me. Every agreed order that's entered in by the enforcement division, I sign every agreed order and every default order. So I'm always looking at how are we applying it, what's consistency, and Ron will tell you with the excellent work they do, I still ask a lot of questions like, so what was going on here? I noticed that we said investigation or inspection. When's the last inspection? Because I want to get a sense of what the you know, what the thought process is. So there are some checks and balances that are included into the process as well.
I will attest to the fact that Brian has been asking lots of questions.
Bill had it down pat for like, you know, 15, 20 years, and I'm still a rookie at this part of it.
Members, any more questions, comments before we move to approve the penalty matrix?
This is Colonel Schmidt. One more comment, if you'll allow me. I have been working about every work group committee there is, and I have come to know the staff, and I've come to see the mentality of the staff and the spirit of the staff. And trust is something that this industry doesn't have in the bureaucrats. And I'm telling you that little by little, I've become a convert. And I feel very comfortable with the direction we're going. So my compliments to TDLR.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
I've known Carlos for decades. That means a lot. That says a lot.
I trust that you have.
Absolutely. I'll consider a motion.
I have one more question, I'm sorry.
Yes, absolutely.
I apologize.
No,
please. So why not make it a Class A as opposed to Class B? Like, my hesitancy is we know this isn't being done every day by every provider, because we can't. So I don't like making rules where we know someone is not following the rule. Everyone in the industry is not technically following the rule today. But I understand we have to make a rule for it, so why not just make it Class A or?
Well, being a course requirement, it seems a little bit more serious, but again, it was a group decision. It wasn't just Ron's decision about that. So I think that's kind of a question for your group as well, if you want to decide that you want to move that somewhere else. But
And you have the ability to make that motion and just.
I would move to make 1001-101B3 a Class A violation.
I second that motion.
could we put that in the administrative violation section?
Excellent. Real quickly, just to make sure, Blake, you are making a motion to change that one, the 101B3, and move it over to A, is what you're...
Correct.
Excellent. Carlos seconds that. Members, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
And I would like to make a motion that we adopt this penalty matrix with the change that just been reflected.
Thank you, Carlos, so much. Motion is on the floor. Anybody, I'm sorry, seconding it? Thank you so much, Blake, for seconding that. Motion's on the floor. Everybody that's in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion is approved. The penalty matrix, fantastic. Ron, I just want to thank you so much. You've done a great
Thank you.
job. Everybody that's been working with you guys, obviously the staff. I think you guys did a great job putting this together.
We had a great team.
It's just really, really, I like the way it's structured, just easy for anybody to look at it and see exactly what's very clear.
Thank you.
You guys did a great job.
Ron, outstanding. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. And Chris, you did a fantastic job with your Googling and moving around on the board. Thanks,
Chris. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Awe-struck.
Okay, that's it, excellent. We'll move on to the next item. Recommendations for agenda items for our next committee meeting. Members, that's for us. Anything we want to recommend?
to add to the agenda for our next meeting?
Blake Garrett, I have one for, I believe it's for Chloe. If we could see the number of certificates purchased by type year over year. I know there's a reference to right now is a really busy time. Of course, providers are requesting or purchasing certificates. I'd just be interested to see the total and maybe a trend over past years, if that's not too much work.
I do have a quick question in regards to the driving safety school license expiration dates. I know that the instructors, you can type in their number, you can see immediately when their license expires. And we've talked about this before. Right now, as a course provider, if I wanted to know when a school's license is expiring, where do I go? What do I do? As opposed to picking up the phone and calling every time. Anything on a database or anything?
Dan, do you have an answer? You want to go to the table,
Anybody?
please? One of you two, or both of you.
How about both of you?
Thank you so much.
Shasta, thank you for stepping up.
Hi, Shannon.
Hey, this is Shanasty. I'm in education examination. So currently, the process that is being done for a driving safety school certificate, when the license is mailed, the expiration date is listed on the license itself, and the team should, once we've processed the application, we send an email, and we send an email to the course provider, and in that email, it gives the expiration date of that license. But it is not currently posted on the DES search tool.
This is Brian Bialetta, Education Examination as well. That it's actually a very simple process for us. It's just we tap a button and it automatically emails you that that school, the driving safety school, has been renewed. And if that message that you get, our email message, doesn't have an expiration date, please let us know, and then we'll see if we can clarify that for you, get it up to date. Because I do know there's been a concern about when a school closes, and since y'all are, in essence, managing the school, to make sure they're in compliance, that just helps you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay. Members,
Excuse me.
anything else?
Excuse me.
Yes.
This is Mark Gladney, General Counsel. I would suggest that agenda items G and I be carried over for the next meeting as well.
Thank you, Mark. So you're suggesting, that we continue the discussion on the certificates? Absolutely. Excellent. I make a motion to add item G to the agenda for next time. And you also recommended I agree, for the electronic. So basically kind of the same thing there. It's connected. I make a motion to add that to the agenda items for the next committee meeting. Anybody?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kevin, so much. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries to add those two items. Thank you, Mark. What's up?
Kevin, I guess while we're on it, if we need to discuss further on J, we need to go ahead and carry that over, just in case.
Absolutely. I mean, we can definitely provide the update or have a place for discussion on it. Absolutely.
I'm sure everything's great, but.
Sure.
I want to make sure.
So
so
I'll
you-
just
you-
make a motion that we carry over J as well to the.
Thank you so
next
much. I
agenda.
really appreciate that, Kevin. We have a motion to add J, which is the discussing the penalty matrix.
Carlos Reyna, I second it.
Thank you, Carlos, for seconding that. Motion is on the floor. Members, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried.
Mr. Chairman, Brian Francis, we'll definitely have the staff reports, but we'll also be able to report on the publication of our strategic plan. It will be accomplished by then, so we can give you feedback on that and go through some of the key elements that may impact your industry as reflected in that plan.
That's great. Our next item is L, and that's the discussion of our next time, our next date and time for our next committee meeting. What do we got?
Mr. Chairman, we're looking at Wednesday, either August the 22nd or 29th.
What day is that?
That's Wednesday. for each of those.
Wednesday, so the 22nd and the 29th of August. When is the first day of school? Do we know?
I do.
For the
Depends on
kids?
the district you're in.
Yeah, it depends.
Oh, great. Ooh. So the 29th is. Right. That's kind of key, right? I wouldn't want to come in on the first week of school. Sounds more like August the 22nd would be
22nd.
safer. Anybody have a problem with August the?
I just couldn't make August the 22nd, so that's just, that's the only date that works. I just can't attend that.
Mr. Chairman, what about August the 8th?
August the 8th?
The 8th. as
That's
well.
also a
It's also Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Which is hard.
There's a traffic safety conference.
Okay.
So we have 3 days here. We're looking at the 8th, the 22nd, and the 29th. Just real quickly, for August the 8th, raise your hand if you just feel that you just wouldn't make it. Okay, we got Nina. That's kind of key. Okay, August the 22nd, if you can't make it August the 22nd, kind of raise your hand. We got 2. Okay. August the 29th. Anybody that would not be able to make it on the 29th? Okay. I think, members, then we are I'm going to recommend the 29th, if it's okay with everyone. Delia? I think the 29th, 10 a.m. is still good, members?
Yes. Thank you.
That sounds pretty good. Is that the only day we need to look at right now?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Yes, sir.
Then that's it. August the 29th, 10 o'clock in the morning is our next advisory committee meeting here for everybody that's listening. Before I adjourn, anything else? Thank you all so very much. The audience that's here, those of you that come in, and those of you that are listening, staff, you guys are incredible. Thank you so much for everything. I really appreciate it. It's my pleasure to be here every time. Thank you so much. That's it. We are adjourned.
Thank you.